So regular viewers may know that I recently returned to top level league racing to limited success, I think it's fair to say.
It's go time, let's do it.
Drive through penalty, you've got to drive through
But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about kind of how I got there and the things that I learned along the way in terms of practicing and prep and the things that I tried to see if I could gain some time. So we're going to start out with the sort of smaller things then. These are really just kind of in-game settings that I sort of tried that honestly didn't really seem to give me much. So the first is I changed my camera angle. I basically copied Gillon camera angle. I thought he's got a video out on it. Great, let's just copy that. It was basically a lot closer and made the car a lot bigger. I actually, in the end, ended up tweaking it to be sort of halfway between what Yano runs and what the game has by default. And honestly, I didn't feel like it helped me at all. In fact, it actually ended up inadvertently shafting me because I jumped the start on my first league racing attempt. And it turns out this was effectively caused by the name tags being right under the start lights, which is something I didn't know was a thing until race day, until after race day, when I realized that those icons changing right before the lights went out is what caused me to jump start. But that was obviously just, if I had a few more races, I would have got used to that. But honestly, I didn't personally find any time with this. The only thing I think for cameras is to make sure you've got camera movement switched off, so your camera is firmly bolted to the car, then you do get a bit more of a feel for it moving around. But other than that, honestly, I personally didn't find anything with changing the camera. Next up, you've got the physical wheel position. Now, people always say that my wheel is really low in my lap, etc. I mean, the reason it is content, partly my rig, but also partly content. The fact that you can see my face nice and clearly, my hands aren't blocking my face when I'm driving, things like that. Again, I wasn't able to move it too much, but I did move it up a little bit. I actually didn't find any advantage from this either. Maybe if I was in a full-on Formula rig, it might help a little bit, but I find my position comfortable. I find it easy to drive. I don't feel like it restricts me anyway, so this to me didn't really do anything. Next up, I disabled DLSS. So I actually have got a 4K screen. I play and record in 4K, but obviously with everything else that's going on, it's quite demanding on my PC, even with a 1490. So I run DLSS, which renders the game at, I think, 1440p in quality mode and then upscales it. I don't know, I just thought I'd give this a go, just in case DLSS was doing something weird with the physics or something, I don't know. But actually, this didn't really seem to help at all. It did nothing. In fact, if anything, it just made it look blurrier. You guys won't even be able to see this in the content. But it, basically, DLSS was, even though it was starting at 1440p, because it's so good these days and scales everything perfectly, everything's really sharp. So I turned it off, so we're rendering actually in 4K, and everything looked really blurry. It was really interesting. Despite rendering at a higher resolution, things looked worse. So this did nothing. I found no difference in terms of feeling the physics or the curbs. I may be wrong. I'm not an esports driver, but I didn't feel like this did anything. It was worth a try though. Next up, I changed my force feedback settings. And once again, I just got a copy Yano settings. I don't think this gained me anything. I was quite happy with my force feedback settings before. I honestly don't think changing them to what Yano had really was very different for a start. But in particular, I barely noticed it, to be honest. I do feel like maybe this gave me a very, very slight better feel. Honestly, I didn't make much difference, but maybe you guys are running very different settings. But the other problem is, of course, it varies wheel to wheel and platform to platform, things like that. So it's hard to know what to run for your particular wheel. You just got to tweak it and get it right. But for me, my force feedback settings already felt quite nice. So this one didn't really find me anything. Moving on to some slightly bigger ones then. First of all, I studied the ERS usage and the lines of other people, but actually this led me down a blind path a little bit. In fact, it led me in the wrong direction because I chose esports to look at. Now, I know there's an esports build, but I've forgotten how big a difference the esports build is this year. The ERS is different, the Dirty Air was different, and I think it feels slightly different as well. I've not actually tried it myself, but basically, what it turned out is the ERS was more significantly different than I realised. So I was using the esports ERS deployment in qualifying, which I reckon probably cost me about 1/10 of a second per lap in qualifying. But actually, qualifying's not my strong point anyway. I'd have been at the back regardless. This actually did nothing for me, but it did cost me 1/10 in qualifying, which is a pretty significant chunk of time. So I think it definitely is wise to look at other people's lines and look at other people's ERS users and stuff. Just be wary, particularly if you're looking at esports, because they are on a separate build of the game. Everybody else, of course, in theory, should be on the same build as you, but you never know if it's a 6-month-old video you're looking at. Maybe that could be outdated as well. So it's definitely worth it for inspo, especially if you're just completely lost and you don't know what to do. But just always take it with a pinch of salt, unless it's literally someone that you know well, that's on the same platform as you, that's a recent video, that's on the main build of the game, then maybe you can trust it a bit more, because just things change. And also even things like your wing level. So in terms of your ERS deployment strategy and qualifying, the differing wing levels will change that slightly. So yeah, again, bit of a pinch of salt with that one, but it did actually personally lead me down a blind path. In terms of lines though, I felt like I didn't really find anything. There wasn't really anything that I found that people were doing differently to me, particularly. In terms of gear choice as well, for me personally, didn't really find much for that, but these are the sort of things that you can start to find, oh, hey, this person's at the gear lower or higher than me then, let me try that. And obviously the same with the ERS deployment strategies. And speaking of that, honestly, for me, we've got two big things left. The first of which is just doing lots of laps. Now, this is a stupid one to include, but it's really central, to being quick or to improving. You've just got to do lots of laps. And when people have asked me for advice in the past in terms of how to improve, what to do, I've got a league race, what do you recommend? I've almost always just said, just practice. You just got to do the laps. Just do lots of laps, learn things over time, and you'll get better. And that is true. But what I actually found for my first league race I did at Mexico, I did about 6 hours of practice or so for that one before the race. But what I actually found is, from like hour 1 to 2 to hour 6, I didn't really find any more time. I think the only things I really found over, or just generally the laps that I did, was curb usage. Absolutely getting that right. Sometimes you may be cautious of a curb and you're not sure if you can use it, then it actually turns out you can use it, etc. Or how to hit it, when to hit it, just by number of laps. If you hit that curb 50 times, by the 50th attempt, you've probably got a good idea, based on the 50 different lines you've taken of those 50 tries, what to do and not to do over certain curbs. Certain curbs you have to avoid, certain curbs you have to hit just right, certain curbs you have to cut, certain curbs you don't cut, etc. So that definitely helped a little bit, just by the more laps doing. But again, after an hour or two, I was already pretty clued up on that. Short shifting, for me, it's not as natural as it should be. I definitely tend to run lower gears. I'm slowly getting myself out of that. But short shifting does help. It just dumbs the power and things like that. So that's something for me personally that I found I was improving with, of just, going shorter on the gears and just getting used to that, because it's just not what I'm used to. That's what practice is all about. And also consistency. The more laps you do, the more consistently you can get close to that lap time, which is something I did gain from hours 2 to 6, a bit of consistency. But again, I've already got a few hundred hours on the game. I really feel like if I only did 2 hours of practice, the performance would have been exactly the same as 6 hours. I really don't think it gave me much, to be honest. And the final point then, and by far the biggest one, and I'm sure you guys can guess what it is the car setup. Now, obviously, I run VSE, Virtual Setup Engineer Setup Shop, but setups genuinely are massive. Now, currently, for F124, the VSE setups are stable setups. They're fast as well, don't get me wrong, but they're leaning more towards the stable side, which is why for F125, we're releasing fast and stable setups. So one will be, really quick, really hard to drive, but really quick. The other one will be sort of more like they were on F124. First up, I got the guy that's going to do setups for F125 for me to make my setup, and that is pretty much the setup I ended up running, so that's a good sign for that. And honestly, the biggest difference was just the amount of rotation. Where the default VSE setups are quite stable, this just had a lot of rotation. And obviously, that gives you more cornering ability. It means it's harder to drive, but it gives you more cornering ability. But actually, what I found is I was able to take curbs more with it. Now, this wasn't related to suspension setup or ride height. This was just purely because the amount of rotation it's got, hitting a curb, I was still able to rotate the car. The car bouncing over a big curb, particularly, turn 2 of Mexico, wasn't really affecting me that badly, because the car was just able to almost rotate around it. Whereas because I had a bit more of a stable setup before, hitting that curb was just making the car bounce, and because the car was bouncing, the front wheels weren't gripping and I wasn't going around the corner. The car would almost go straight over the bumps. So where I've seen previously esports and league races and stuff hit curbs and still turn, I'm like, that looks like a mistake to me. How are you hitting that curb and still being fast? Now I know why. It's because their setups have got so much rotation. Honestly, that was the biggest change. Setup wise, you just got to add as much rotation as you can feel like you can drive without spinning for a race distance. That's basically what you got to do. Just get as much rotation you can, get used to it. And actually over time, if you get used to that setup, you'll probably find you can then handle a bit more rotation, end up with a car that's to an average person, bordering on undrivable, but will be very fast if you can drive it. The only other thing really for setups was low wing versus high wing. Now, generally in the F1 games, higher wing setups tend to be faster up to a point because you can go quicker through the corners. For me, actually, I tried changing at Mexico the setup by 10 clicks, the wing levels by 10 clicks up or down. And it didn't make a difference to my lap time. I did pretty much the same lap time, which is definitely a thing that's unique to me. Most people would tend to go quicker with the higher wing setup. Obviously, it turns on the track. You're not going to be the fastest at Monza with a maximum wing setup. There's always a limit to how high you'd go in terms of where the optimum point is. But I think to be quick on a high wing setup, you just got to be absolutely on it. You've got to make sure that you're making use of those wings in the corners. And that's why for me, I tend to prefer a lower wing setup because I'm not great at nailing every corner. I'm great at being 95% or 99%, whatever, in every corner. To me, lower wings are great because you're not reliant on getting that at last little 1% out in the corners, but you get the speed in the straights instead, which is much easier. You just sat there at full throttle. So low wing versus high wing, I personally didn't really find too much difference, and actually I tended to prefer a lower wing setup. I almost forgot to mention Grand Prix mode versus online mode. So this is actually something I did try. So most of my practice was done in Grand Prix mode, but I thought, hey, I better do some practice in online lobbies because all the league races say it does feel different. It's a bit slower, faster, whatever, depending on the track. Actually, I didn't find any real difference. If anything, I went a little bit faster for the Mexico track on online mode in an actual lobby versus Grand Prix mode. Again, this is one of those things that I do trust them. I don't doubt there is some slight differences there, but I think realistically for your practice, if you're talking about a few hundreds difference here and there, unless there was some significant difference at some tracks, maybe certain bumps or something for some reason might be more severe, that might actually change your lines. Just not really a thing that I personally found. I personally in the future would do all my practice in Grand Prix mode, and in fact did. For the second race I did around Abu Dhabi, all of my practice was done just in Grand Prix mode. And then you've got the flick steering, which is when, most famously by Thomas Ronhart and F1 Esports, when you turn in really aggressively, really quickly. This is just kind of manipulating the physics a little bit of the game. Honestly, I'm not an expert on this. I never really fully figured it out. I do it a little bit, not to enough. I don't doubt there is time in it. There's a reason that the top league racers and esports drivers are doing it. I just think it's one of those things it's only worth doing if you are right at the top. If you're in a tier 2, PSGL or WR, whatever, right at the top of your game, absolutely. It's probably essential, honestly, to be competitive in those. If you're not, I personally don't really think it gives much time. But I could be wrong on that one. I could be wrong, but I just think just time on the game is what matters. Just learning the physics of the game, learning its shortcomings, learning how to take advantage of it. Because I was kind of already doing it sometimes, before I even really saw the esports stuff. Just occasionally, if I was going deep, I would just turn and just because I know that's the way to do it. And I've done this for many years. It's a strategy that somewhat makes sense, but for me, when I was doing it, I didn't suddenly find a 10th or whatever. Again, I don't doubt there is some time. I think it's one of those techniques that's really niche and really advanced that it should be pretty much the last thing you do. If you're looking for the last 10th or two compared to the absolute top guys on the game, absolutely, it's worth pursuing. Other than that, I just think it's a distraction, honestly. So just to conclude then, what I found while practicing for some top level league races recently and trying to rediscover some old league racing form from a long time ago. First up, honestly, unless you've got an issue, I wouldn't worry too much about your settings. You're not really going to find time tweaking your camera very slightly or moving your wheel very slightly unless it's uncomfortable. Or, if you're in a rickety rig or on a rickety desk, you can see that when I'm turning, my desk's moving. That's probably not good. Things like that. Obviously, I've got a nice solid rig and a decent wheel and things like that. So for me, there was nothing there. And realistically, unless you're really trying to push to the top, you're probably not going to be buying a whole massive rig anyway to try and improve. But, it would improve, but just set up, setting tweaking, honestly, I don't think there's much there. The lesson I learned was don't just do laps for the sake of it. Don't just do 6 hours of non-stop laps. Yes, okay, if you're a beginner, that is going to be massive for you. But if you're at the point where you are, half decent in the game, you've got, 100 plus hours in the game, you know what it is, just doing loads of laps doesn't really help. I think my advice to you is only do more laps if you genuinely got something to try. Okay, let's try this EOS deployment, or let's try these lower wings, or let's try this different setup, or let's try this different line, or let's try this different gear. Million different things. Great, keep going. Keep trying stuff. If and this to me, I've always actually got faster overnight, weirdly. I'll do some practice, I'll do an hour or two, and then I'll sleep on it, and I'll come back the next day and I'll be quicker. And I think it's because of that, because I have some new ideas to try. I go, okay, yeah, actually, you know, subconsciously thinking about it, and I've realised, oh no, yeah, actually that line was quite good, or oh, why don't I try the ERS in this way? And there's lots of things there to think about. So sort of, I actually learn more during downtime more than I do during doing laps, in theory. Not more, but you know what I mean. I don't know. Anyway, that is what I learned when I recently practiced for league racing. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments if you've got any advice or what you thought of this advice. But yeah, I was honestly surprised. I just thought doing loads of laps was going to give me time, setup was going to give me time, and as true as that was, it was definitely to a much lesser extent. And for me, if I was to return to top level league racing again in the future and try to, you know, get faster and faster, it would be all about just trying different things. Why is this person able to get on the power this much earlier than me? What if I just press the throttle a bit harder? Oh, I spin. Okay, what can I do about that? Okay, maybe I can tweak my throttle, or maybe I can be a different gear, or maybe I can tweak the setup there. Just learn. Don't just aimlessly do laps. That to me was my biggest mistake in this. Although it didn't negatively affect my performance, you're just going to get bored of the game. So always make sure you've got something to aim for. But anyway, guys, don't forget to follow if you haven't already, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.